So, chapter 6 is all about attitudes and how our attitudes reflect in our behavior. We are going to go over what is an attitude, a little bit about how it can be measured, kinds of persuasive messages, and if we often or at all change our attitudes as a result of our own actions. Study of attitudes. Attitudes are simply positive, negative, or mixed reaction to a person, object, or idea. Most of our attitudes we do have explicit, so attitudes that we show in an explicit manner. That would be like when you come down the stairs and you're all grumpy in your face. Most of our attitudes are implicit. They are something that we hold with inside of us. We are not always even aware that we have an attitude toward a certain thing. You probably cannot see all of that. There are 4 possible reactions to attitude objects: positive, negative, dual attitude, which means you're ambivalent. You probably hold a mix between positive and negative, and then indifference, you just don't care. We measure attitudes mostly through self-report, so you would use something like a Likert scale. If you're a psych major, you probably pronounce that Likert, and you are wrong. It is Likert. It was named after Mr. Likert. Self-report measure, it would be, what is your attitude? I'm happy, I like it. The attitude, I'm angry, I dislike that, etc. The IAT, Implicit Association Test, is a test you can find online, and it is a quick test. You'll see flashes of pictures of a thing, a noun basically, and then associate it with either good or bad words. The faster you associate with either good or bad words kind of helps to measure the implicit attitudes that we hold. I have done it twice on 2 different measures. I highly recommend it. It's very, very interesting. We are not going to discuss that. This is the IAT, the test I was just talking about. So attitudes, strong likes and dislikes, are rooted in our genetic makeup, so they are not all learned. All behaviors are not learned. Some of them are just in our DNA. Twins that were separated at birth can hold the same type of attitudes. In class, I told them my dad and his dad did not know each other growing up. My dad saw him one time between the ages of 5 and 45. When they got together at 45, they talked the same, they spoke the same, they held the same viewpoints. It was like talking to the same person. They stood the same. So some of that is just in our DNA. Some of it also comes from our parents, our friends, even our enemies. A huge portion comes from the social and cultural context in which we live. Of course, our attitudes are also learned through behavior of those around us. Attitudes in general reflect our behavior. There is a process, so when it is within ourselves, we have the ability for our attitude to reflect our behavior. It generally will. So if we hold an attitude about something, we will act on that attitude. That is not always the case, however. Theory of planned behavior basically states if we hold an attitude towards behavior, subjective norms, so it is something that society deems okay, we hold control over it, leads to our intention, which leads to our behavior. Let me see. How are we persuaded to change our minds? Through communication. There are 2 routes to persuasion. Persuasion is simply the process by which attitudes are changed. It's basically getting someone else to think what we want them to think. The 2 modes or processes of persuasion are the central route to persuasion and the peripheral route to persuasion. The Central route is, and again, I apologize, I know you can't see all that's on the PowerPoint. The central route is when it's something that greatly affects us or something that's very, very important to us, so we give it the time and attention that it deserves. So for most big choices, if you're going to have an attitude about a big thing like politics or religion, etc., you probably want to use the central route, which basically we need to be able to hear it, to understand it, to comprehend it, and to be able to think about it in the future. So it's really something that we kind of ruminate on. We'll even seek like more facts. A lot of times we seek facts to kind of confirm what we already think. So the central route, while you will do some of that, you will also seek broad facts so that you get a broad picture. The peripheral route is the easier route of persuasion. It is when we let someone persuade us by virtue of we either respect them, so just because we respect them, we take what they say as fact. They are a good communicator. Things like if we think they're good looking will affect the peripheral route. It's the things that we hear that we don't want to put a lot of time and thought into, and so we accept what they are trying to say to us as fact. The route selection we look at the source, the message, and the audience. So the source, we look at who's presenting the message itself, what they're saying and what context, and the audience, we look at to whom the message is directed. I am not going to touch on that one. For the source, credibility, they must be competent, so you must believe that they know what they are saying and talking about, and trustworthy. You need to know that they are going to tell you the truth, whether it backs their own beliefs or whether they do their own research and say, hey, this might be an alternative solution, so you feel like you are hearing the truth from them. Likability. They're similar to us, so you are more likely to listen to someone and think they're credible if they're like you. So in similarity, if you hold the same hobbies or you're from the same in-group. Also, if they're physically attractive, that's why we use like supermodels and big buff guys to like sell things on commercials, advertisements, because physicality sells, right? It's a list of people that we tend to trust. Nurses top the list, even above doctors, actually a good bit above doctors. High school teachers are kind of low on there. Real estate agents are probably a little higher than I would have assumed. And members of Congress are right down there with car salespeople at an 8%. I'm curious as to who that 8% is. Let me see over here. Moving on to the message, the medium of communication, so how it's communicated, informational strategies, we'll go over that in a second. Message discrepancy, appeals to emotion, fear appeals, we will go over not quite all of these. Informational strategies. So if you're using the central route to persuasion, the quality of the argument is more important than the length. So if you have something to say and you can get it out short, succinct, and you use facts and they're indisputable, that is the way to go. Peripheral processing often uses simple heuristics, and so if you're processing through your peripheral route, you are likely to think the longer the message, the more important it must be, therefore it must be true. You should save yourself a lot of time and try to activate that central route by really thinking about what is being said. How discrepant should a message be from the audience's existing position? So you do not want, if you are trying to change your audience's opinion about something, if you come on too strong, or we use the example of the people on social media that are like always like, feels like every time you see something from them, they're like pounding their political views into, your head. First off, block them or hide them. So nobody needs that, right? But secondly, that is not the best route to persuade someone to your way of thinking. They're going to feel attacked. And what you will really do is end up strengthening their own position, because they will defend it. And as they're defending it, it's just going to strengthen it within them. So if you want to help change someone's opinion, first off, you need to come at it from a more factual, rational manner rather than emotional, and do it in small bits and to the best of your ability. Try not to come up across as abrasive or offensive. Some of us are just more abrasive and offensive in our manner. I can definitely be abrasive and offensive when I have something like, I think it's important, right? But we need to temper what we say in order to be effective. Fear appeals. We can use fear to incentivize change. It can be effective. It is not necessarily, so it says its ultimate impact depends on the strength of the arguments. It is mostly going to depend on how a person reacts to fear. Think about the mask debate. Some people react in fear and they wear the masks. Some people wear masks because they want to be respectful to others. Other people refuse to wear the masks because they feel it's an infringement on their rights. And some people refuse to wear the masks because they refuse to acknowledge the fear. So fear appeals will work with some people. You need to know your audience. Subliminal messages, they are not legit. You can certainly hear and even understand a subliminal message. It does not mean you're going to behave on that similar subliminal message. All right. Your audience, we are not going to go over that. Persuasion by our own actions. I did not go over this in class. If we are forced to take the opposing position, in doing so and doing the research for that, we may find that there are some aspects of it that we actually agree with. So if you want people to take an opposing position, if you kind of want to make them see things the way that you do, if they're willing to act in a role-playing play or position or whatever, however you want to call that, it could be an effective strategy just because they will kind of be forced to look at the position from another's viewpoint. Lastly is cognitive dissonance theory, which basically states that we like to be in equilibrium. We like our thoughts and our feelings to match up with our behaviors. If our thoughts and our feelings do not match up, we will either change our thoughts by saying, oh, that's not actually so bad for me, or by changing our behaviors. Slide 43 right here, I recommend that you take a look at it. It kind of gives of the 5 different things that you can do, and that is just ways to reduce dissonance. So again, dissonance is when we are at odds between our attitudes, what we feel like we should be doing, and our behavior, what we're actually doing. We all want to be at peace within ourselves. So 43 kind of goes over ways to reduce dissonance. Let me see. The rest of the chapter, that is the end of what we went over today. The only other slide I would recommend you look at is slide 52. It gives some comparisons of the different theories of self-persuasion. The one I mostly want you to look at, though, is reducing dissonance. That is it, and I will see you all on Monday.